Namaskar all. This is Dr. Preeti Sharma, Senior Assistant Professor, IAS Deemed to be University, Jaipur. In the previous video, I have discussed about different types of decisions which is required to be taken by the financial manager, that is investment decision, financing decision and dividend decision. So as soon as the firm takes an investment decision, simultaneously it has to take a financing decision, that is a decision to determine various sources of finance in order to meet the capital requirements of the firm. So today I am going to discuss in this video in detail about different long-term sources of finance. Before further starting about that, I would like to discuss about that the sources of finance is divided into two categories. Basically, it is divided into long-term sources of finance and short-term sources of finance. So, as I have already told you that I am going to discuss in detail about different long-term sources of finance. But before talking about different types of long-term sources of finance, we should know what exactly long-term sources of finance is. So, long-term sources of finance are those types of finance which is generally taken for a period of more than 5 years. It can be taken for 6 years, 10 years or 15 years. Generally, it is taken for the purchase of fixed assets or for replacement of old machinery with a new one or for starting a new business. Now, let us study in detail different types of long-term sources of finance. So, there are different long-term sources of finance, like we have equity shares, now what is equity shares? Basically, equity shares are the ordinary shares which does not have any preferential right regarding payment of dividend or refund of capital. That means the income which we use to pay to the equity shareholder, it is not fixed in nature. Why it is not fixed in nature? Because it depends upon the profits earned by the company. So, let us say for example, if in a particular year company does not have a sufficient profits, then they could take a decision of not to pay dividend to equity shareholder. That is why their income is always unstable. But on the other hand, they can enjoy the profits earned by the company. That means they can have a share in the profits of the firm by enjoying the capital appreciation. Now, there are different features of equity capital, like it provides permanent capital. Now, what is permanent capital? It means they provide permanent capital to the company which is non-refundable during the lifetime of the company. That means they can demand for their capital only in one situation, that is at the time of winding up of a company. And even at the time of winding up of a company, they have the last priority towards refund of capital, because first the claims of the debenture holders and preference shareholders will be meet out, and if anything is left, then it will be distributed among the equity shareholders. Other than that, equity shareholders they are treated as the owners of the company. Why they are treated as the owners of the company? Because they have they can participate in the management decisions of the company, they can elect or remove the directors of the company, and they have a right to vote in the meeting also. That is why they are treated as the owners of the company. There is another important right, that is right of preemption, which is enjoyed by the equity shareholders. Now, what is right of preemption? Preemption means whenever a firm may issue new shares, then they have to first issue or offer to the existing shareholders at less cost. This is not an obligation on the part of the equity shareholders to subscribe those shares, but it is an optional. If they want to subscribe, they can have it at low price. Otherwise, if they don't, that is their choice. So, these are some of the features of equity shares. Now, next type of long-term sources of finance is, next type of long-term sources of finance is preference shares. Now, what is preference shares? Basically, these are those shares which have a preferential right regarding payment of dividend and refund of capital as compared to equity shareholders. They have fixed rate of income in the form of dividend. That means whenever a company have to pay dividend to them, they have to pay in fixed amount. It does not vary with the level of profits earned by the company. Other than that, it has some hybrid security. Here, hybrid security means that it has features of both equity shareholders as well as debentures also. Now, there are some common features in preference shares and debentures. Like in case of preference shares and debentures, they does not have a right to vote. They cannot participate in the management decisions of the company, but at the same time, both of them enjoy veto power. Now, what is veto power? Veto power means they can raise their voice if they would affect their rights. Another thing is that preference shareholders and equity shareholders, I am talking about the common things which is shared by both preference shareholders and equity shareholder, is that they have the there is no fixed burden on the obligation on the part of the company to pay dividend. So, if in a particular year company is having a low profits, then they could take a decision of not to pay dividend either to preference shareholders or equity shareholders. So, these are some of the features of preference shares. Now, next type of long term sources of finance is debentures. Basically, debentures holders are treated as the creditors of the company. It is a written acknowledgement of debt taken by the company. So, firm has to be, whenever a firm may issue debentures, they have to be very careful while issuing debentures, because they have to pay timely interest and principal amount on a maturity date to the debenture holders. And if they are unable to do that, then they could face a situation of winding up of a company. Winding up of a company means they could face a problem of financial risk, which would be very dangerous for a firm. We can discuss another advantage from the point of view of the debenture holders, that their income is fixed in nature, irrespective of the level of profit earned by a firm. So, even if the firm is not having a profit, then still they are under obligation to pay interest to them, and if they are unable to pay, then they could face the financial risk of the company. Debenture holders cannot participate in the management decisions of the company, as they are treated as the outsiders of the company. So, they could not elect the directors of the company as in case of equity shareholders. So, these are some of the features of debentures. Next, we have term loans. I hope you all must be familiar by this term. Basically, term loans are taken from the financial institutions and commercial banks. We have different financial institutions, like we have IDBI, IFCI, ICICI is there. Similarly, we have public sector banks, private sector banks are there. So, they used to provide term loan generally for a period ranging from 6 to 10 years, and the rate of interest provided by these financial institutions depend upon the credit worthiness of the borrower. Then next type of long term finance is lease agreement. Yes, basically lease agreement is an agreement which is created between two parties, that is lessor and lessee. Now, who is a lessor? Lessor is that person who is the owner of the assets, who gives an asset or who lends his assets to the lessee on some periodical rentals for a particular period of time, and this period of time is generally for a period of more than 5 years. Let us say, for example, you have taken a petrol pump on lease, or you have taken heavy machinery like ships, aircrafts or cranes on lease. So, these could be an examples of lease agreement. So, basically lease agreement is an agreement in which lessee has to pay some amount, or he will be giving some right to use an asset of the lessor for some particular period of time by paying a lease rentals. And at last, we have venture capital. Nowadays, venture capital has become very popular in India, because commercial banks and financial institutions are not playing their role properly. The reason being behind that is that inadvocacy of capital or less focus in risky projects or delay in project evaluation are some of the reasons due to which venture capital has become popular so much in India. Basically, it is provided in the areas of advanced technology or research and development projects, or to those, to young entrepreneurs who come up with new ideas or startups. So, venture capital is provided to those young entrepreneurs who has the potential to develop into significant economic contributions. But venture capital is a very risky capital. Why it is a risky capital? Because venture capital is provided during early stages of finance, and it is generally associated with the cost of it is generally associated with new projects or new products or operations or management. That's why the risk factor is very high, because it's a new business, new establishment. Another reason is that another feature of venture capital is that they could face a problem of liquidity, because venture capital is provided during early stages of financing. So, here the investment is always illiquid, generally it happens like that. Then venture capital make their investment in equity. So, they are not looking for regular dividend, but they are looking for capital gain which they can earn when the project will get succeed. Venture capital is not merely financing, but they also provide their expertise to the management. So, these are all some of the important features of venture capital. And now, I would like to wrap this session by concluding that the interest of the owners, investors and the cost of capital should be kept in mind while determining about different long-term sources of finance. Thank you so much.